Hey, welcome to the Reset with Nico, Bleu, and Kenny Burns. That's me. We discussed the hot topics of last week. It is July 19th. It's 2020. How you doing, Nico?
Doing pretty good. My eyes are watering like crazy, so forgive me if I keep going like this.
Oh, check this out. Look at my shirt. No,
Oh, it's
this
like little Charlie Brown t-shirt.
Right.
Dun, 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 dun.
So if you were holding the football for me and I was going to kick it, what would you do?
Oh, you on your ass, bro.
I already know. I knew the answer to that question.
You are on your ass. Oh wait, excuse me. My mother doesn't like it when I curse on the podcast. You're hitting the ground. You're going down, bro. That's what's happening. You're going down.
I don't know
Don't
why.
give me the football.
I like your shirt. Your shirt's cute. The little Harry Potter thing going on.
Host Gryffindor.
I like it. What is it?
Yeah.
Quidditch jersey.
Yeah. Do you know Harry Potter like that? I was gonna say, what house would you be? What house would you be in?
Ah, man, I don't know the houses. You're gonna get me tore up on these comments.
Oh, okay.
No, that's fine.
We don't get comments, Kenny.
Eventually, we'll put Harry Potter as in our titles.
Exactly.
Clickbait. But yeah, no, I can't remember the houses for some
reason.
You
got obviously Gryffindor, you got Hufflepuff, you got Slytherin.
Right. See, when you say them now, I remember them. Okay. Because it's been so long since I watched the Harry Potter movie.
I'm trying to remember the other ones.
Uh-oh, so you about to get tore up in the comments
Gryffindor,
too.
Hufflepuff, Slytherin. Never mind.
Well, I'm going with Gryffindor then. Team Gryffindor.
Oh, you just want to be in my house.
Your house ain't a bad house. It's nice. It's clean. It's got a nice little window.
Harry's there. Hermione.
Well, anyway, Nico, I wanted to kind of get us started. It's a little bit of a somber note, but this past week, Representative John Lewis, he passed away, and the same day, C.T. Vivian, another civil rights leader, passed away. They were, in John Lewis's case, he was leader of the SNCC movement, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and walked on the Edmunds Pettus Bridge with Martin Luther King, C.T. Vivian. He's probably a little less memorable, but I think most people will know him. They studied the civil rights movement, and one of my most vivid memories of him is seeing him sort of cuss out and give the third degree to these police officers that had just beaten him up. He was protesting at this courthouse, and he was protesting for our right to vote. And they stopped him from doing it, and they just took out their batons. Everybody he was with, they beat him down, and he just went in on them, bloody, bruised, all of that. And it was a very memorable moment. And I just felt proud. I know when I first started studying the civil rights movement as a young man, in my late 20s, probably. And it's those two people are definite heroes, and I wanted to give them a little shout out.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of crazy that they both passed on the same day.
Same day.
Just being here in Georgia, we got to see quite a bit of John Lewis. He was a man about town, and he was so accessible. I really enjoyed reading just sort of the accounts on my friend's Instagram post yesterday. Just there's personal stories of running into him at Kroger or running into him at Piedmont Park, that type of thing. I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times and getting one of those amazing John Lewis hugs.
Yes.
One of the things that really stuck with me, I think, was Michelle Obama's tribute to him that she put on Instagram. Now, if you think about it, I mean, he spent his entire life literally fighting for equality, fighting for just basic human rights. But what Michelle said was so profound. She said that he always had this light and simple quality about him. So even while he was, embroiled in this massive fight for his entire life, he died at 80. He'd been arrested 40 times, 40 plus times in the 60s, at least 5 more times once he was in Congress. He's been beaten. He's had his skull fractured by law enforcement. But he just always managed to just move with this air of joy. And I'm sure you saw a lot of the videos on social media yesterday of him dancing to Pharrell's song, Happy. And that was how he lived. He just knew that it was possible to fight the good fight and to still just keep joy and levity in your heart. And that is something that is going to remain with me for the rest of my life. I'll never forget that about him.
Absolutely. I think his favorite word, well, my favorite word is when he said nonviolent. He said it so much. So it just kind of sparked something to me to always try to handle things with peace. Yeah.
And good trouble.
Right.
Get into the good trouble.
Get into good trouble, right.
Yes. Rest well to both of them.
Absolutely.
All right. So you ready to get into it?
Let's rock and roll. Let's do it.
So let's start off with the Rona. So when we first went in lockdown back in March, and then shortly thereafter, we started wearing masks and all of that. And we had that same mantra that we kept with us. Our goal was to flatten the curve.
Right.
We were trying to flatten the curve and, only going out for essential things, grocery shopping, things like that. And yeah, just being really disciplined because we needed to flatten the curve. So it never occurred to me that we would be here 4 months later in July, seeing the highest numbers yet of this pandemic. The Rona is raging. Right. Like right now, we're at about 140,000 deaths. We're over 140,000 deaths. Most states are currently on the rise with their case numbers. Currently, Florida, which is the epicenter, they've been seeing in the past couple of weeks between 11 and 15,000 new cases a day, and they've been having over 100 deaths a day.
Right.
So we're not doing well. We are not doing well with this. And as we've discussed before, a lot of other countries in the world are starting to move on. Their case lists are middle because they've handled it differently. And your fearless leader, Kenny, in the White House, he's basically just decided that he's done with it. He's not going to talk about it, and he's just pretending that it doesn't exist. Meanwhile, people continue to die.
It's all about the election for him. It's like right now, this is hindering his reelection chances, according to him. And instead of just fixing it to possibly make his chances better, he's like, just like you said,
So not only to make your chances better, but how about save human lives? How about that being a motivating factor right there?
Mm-hmm.
So all of this is going on in our nation, but right here in Georgia, we are having our own personal fight with our leadership here.
Yeah.
We've got our governor, Brian Kemp, literally suing the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Bottoms, over trying to issue a mask mandate.
Right.
So he signed an executive order on Wednesday prohibiting local municipalities from mandating masks. So now he's suing Keisha. On top of that, in addition to the executive order, now he is literally suing her. He had an attorney draw up papers for an actual lawsuit against her in city council. And then today, I just found out, sort of breaking news today, that he has asked for an emergency injunction to restrain Keisha Bottoms from being able to issue press statements or from speaking to the press.
That's ridiculous.
He's trying to put a muzzle on the mayor of Atlanta.
And this goes against what I thought were Republican principles, freedom of speech, all of these different things that the Republicans sort of always have in their back pocket when you try to isolate them, take them off Twitter, do anything. But he's trying to now mandate her speaking in a statewide sense, and it's unfortunate. But as far as I know, when I first heard about this, I looked at a lot of stories and I tried to look at as many interviews with her in it as possible to see her rebuttal. to all of this, and she's fighting back pretty strongly. She's not afraid of being sued, number one. And she sort of is under the contention, like, well, what about, there's no way he can mandate the buildings that the city owns. Like, you can't stop all of it. So, and my thing is, why is he trying to stop any of it in the first place?
Exactly. Well, this is what I was telling you before. If you go to his Instagram page, 10 of the last 14 posts on his page were about encouraging people in Georgia to wear masks. Kenny, he actually did a tour around all of Georgia, 7 different cities in Georgia, did a tour called the Wear a Mask Tour. Right. And all he was doing is he's telling people to wear a mask. All of the pictures on his social media, him wearing a mask and the people around him wearing masks, and with his caption saying, wear a mask. Yet he gets back from said tour and then literally, signs this executive order and then files a lawsuit, wasting taxpayers' money, suing Keisha Bottoms for doing the right thing. It is absolute insanity. And the one thing that happened between his big mask push and this lawsuit and now this injunction that he's filing, Trump came to visit.
Last week in Georgia. Yep.
And it seems to me that he is just getting extreme pressure from the top, and he's just kind of following orders in this ridiculous spree of filing, taking his time. We are in the middle of a pandemic. People are unemployed, and this is what he's wasting his time and resources and our money doing. It's disgraceful.
I don't get it. For me, it's like, going back to the original question, why? What is the purpose? Okay, you're making this a political issue for what reason? And I have been asking myself this question for months because I don't know really what they gain from this. If you look at all the polls are swinging heavily towards Democrats, and it's largely due to the pandemic. And I'm like, so the answer, if this is you all's motivation, which it shouldn't be, like you said earlier, the motivation should just be to help people. But if your motivation is to win the election, you're doing a hell of a job at not, following that mantra. I just can't understand it.
Now, as we talked about, we talked last week about Stacey Abrams for VP, but she went on MSNBC the other night and had some pretty profound things to say. She was saying, from the beginning of this catastrophe, Brian Kemp has demonstrated that he has absolutely no competency in this process. He's following the lead of incompetency and immorality. He's too afraid of the consequences of leadership to actually demonstrate any. And she pointed out more than 3,000 Georgians have perished, disproportionately Black and brown Georgians, and he continues to fiddle while Rome burns. This is not a man who is capable of leadership. And then after we saw what was trending on Twitter later, you could have had Stacey. You could have had Stacey, Georgia. Like, that was this should be our governor right now. Right. This should be our governor. This should be the one leading us, and we would not be dealing with this madness during a pandemic.
100%. I mean, if you look at this state just in general, and you compare it to even Alabama and South Carolina, we're I know Florida is worse, but we're not far off, and I want to make something clear. I don't know how you feel about this, Nico, but how the mask debate has kind of gotten muddy. The waters are muddied with the president, with everything that he's doing. And it's kind of like people are sort of in these camps where I'm going to wear a mask, and if you don't want to wear a mask, then so be it. I'm going to do my part. And, it's a lot more complicated than that. The thing is, if you and I are together and I have on a mask, then I'm protecting you from me. It's not really the other way around. Of course, it makes it harder for the virus to become infected in me if I have on a mask, but it's the immunity isn't there as much as if the other person is wearing a mask. The whole point is to keep your breath sort of in this this area, so that it doesn't reach another person. That's the whole point of social distance. I want to make it clear. I just want to do my part and make it clear why we all should be doing it, because we're all doing it. We can be out there kind of doing stuff.
I mean, it's the basics is like everybody needs to be wearing a mask. I mean, it's just everyone needs to be wearing a mask. And the crazy thing, Kenny, is this even a debate any place else in the world?
It is.
The entire world has dealt with the coronavirus. But is there any other place in the world where there are armed protesters, and, you know, mayors being sued by governors over wearing a mask? It just doesn't happen anywhere else. And the question is why? Exactly. What is it about us in the United States where we feel so entitled? And I honestly think that there's just sort of like, there's like a lack of compassion for our fellow man, just for the collective in general. We're so individualistic, and it's my rights and what I can do. And it's not even about like, I would feel awful if I was asymptomatic, didn't know it, and I had given it to somebody who could have given it to more people and somebody died. Like I just would not want to risk that. I don't understand. I don't understand why people are just willing to put others and potentially in harm's way.
I think it's a sort of Americans have sort of been born and bred with this invincibility mentality. Like we're impervious.
The strongest country.
We're impervious to being sick, and we're impervious to losing wars, and you know, all of these sort of dangerous things to think about. And the thing I just try to tell people that I talk to that may differ in opinion when it comes to this subject is, you know, just try your best to look at everything and be on the right side of history. You know, the last thing you want to do is look back and say, man, I was stupid for thinking this way.
Absolutely. And now we know we're in July, you know, what's getting ready to happen. Schools are going to be opening soon. That puts a whole nother layer of complication in this whole thing.
Right.
I know so many parents who are just really having a hard time with it. Now, here in Georgia, I know most of the schools have decided that they're going to start online and sort of reevaluate in a couple of months. I don't know if most of Georgia, but I know like my nephew's school, that's what they're doing. They're going to start 2 weeks late. They're starting online, and then they're going to reevaluate the situation in September.
Okay. See, that's what I've been reading as well, where it's kind of like a free-for-all in the government when it comes to schools right now. And there's no sort of covered plan where it's like we are all following this guideline. So it's like one county could be doing it very well and another county could be doing it very poorly, and it could just bleed over into other areas. It's crazy.
And as we know, like one of the critical issues in this whole pandemic is, you know, because a lot of people talk about, oh, it's not that bad of a disease, most people recover from it. But as we've talked about many times, one of the biggest issues is just overrunning our healthcare system.
Right.
Hospitals, because a lot of people do have to be hospitalized, whether or not they make it or not is almost, you know, that's not even the point for some of this. It's how many people are going to fill up the ICUs, how many beds are available. I just saw, I believe it was the governor of Mississippi on the news today, and he was saying that 8 of his hospitals, the ICU beds are all completely full, completely taken. And I'm hearing that state after state after state. And so this is what we were talking about back in March and April about not wanting doctors to have to be in the position of triaging and deciding this person gets treatment and this person doesn't. Right. People coming in for all other issues that need an ICU bed that can't get them. Might not even be COVID related. They could have a heart attack.
Exactly. A heart attack, stroke, you name it. And this can cause sort of ancillary damage just because we can't control this pandemic. You got to remember, when people that are asymptomatic catch it, yeah, they may not have symptoms, but there are a large swath of people that will have symptoms. And they'll need care. They'll need, you know, apparatus to help them breathe. They'll need that, you know, and we want them to survive. But if they're taking up, you know, all of these beds because we can't control anything, then, you know, the people that are at risk with other illnesses they could also perish. And so, we're having this discussion to hopefully get people to understand the broader scope. It's not just, oh, there's only 140,000 deaths, which is something that we should 100% have empathy about. But it's okay, if you want to argue that that's a small number, then you can't argue that right now the workers, they're understaffed, they're working. My aunt's a nurse and in Detroit, and she's working like nonstop, just almost
and they're suffering
15-hour days. Yeah.
Not only are they getting the disease, they're dying, their mental health is suffering. We've seen suicides in healthcare workers. This is a mess, and we have got to remember what is at stake here. It is so important. And we need to move on, but I'm just gonna leave with one final thought.
Right.
That, if the experts, the epidemiologists, the virologists, if the experts are wrong and mask wearing doesn't do anything for this disease, then what have we lost?
Exactly.
We've lost next to nothing, a few dollars on some masks and the effort of just putting it on.
Right.
But if they're right, what is at stake here is we could be potentially saving people's lives. It's the smallest, easiest thing that we can do with the most epic payoff, which is preserving human life.
And also, Nico, just to piggyback on your point so we can move on, also look at the examples in the world. America's not the only place in this world. Look at the other examples and see that what they're doing is working. And now let's look at that and say, okay, let's try and do that too. It's not that hard.
Yep. I don't understand why anyone is just not willing to make that very, very small sacrifice.
Right.
Okay, moving on. So last Tuesday, 87 protesters in Kentucky showed up in the front yard of Attorney General Daniel Cameron. Now, Daniel Cameron is the man who was assigned to the Breonna Taylor case.
Right.
And it's taken a long time. Let's just be blunt about it. It's taken a long time. It's been 4 months since she was killed. I don't know exactly how long he's been on the case, but it's been too long. So protesters went to his house. This was highly organized. There were a lot of very high profile people who were a part of this protest. They went to his house, they sat in his yard, and they chanted. And the interesting thing about this is that those protesters got arrested. But then when they were arrested, they were charged not only with misdemeanors, but they were also charged with felonies.
Right.
The reason for the charge was because of the chant that they were saying, which is a normal chant. They said, if we don't get it, burn it down, which refers to burning down the system, like burning down the system. But the LMPD felt like this was a direct threat to the Attorney General's home. And so it's completely unheard of to ever charge peaceful protesters with felonies, but that's what happened here in Kentucky.
Yeah, and I mean, from what I read about this story, it seems as though the Attorney General, his name is Daniel Cameron, he was directly responsible for upgrading those charges.
Wow. I didn't realize that was him. I thought that was the LMPD who just decided to charge them. I didn't know that he was responsible for that. I did hear that he said that he wasn't at home. Nobody was at home when this protest happened, but he did say something that like he felt threatened or.
Right. And it's a shame because what we're at, he has a long statement that I don't even know if I feel like reading, but he feels as though he is handling the case correctly. And it's like, what is 4 months? What's the update? He's given no updates. I mean, you're going into a person's home. This man has a legal firearm. He has no idea who you are. And
they weren't even in uniform.
They weren't in uniform. The cameras are suddenly they're malfunctioning or whatever you want to say. And it's like, dude, at what point are these guys at, I mean, how many, was one of them fired, I think?
One was fired.
One was fired and the rest are on desk duty, if I'm to understand. And so for me, I don't know. I find it peculiar, to say the least. Yeah.
Absolutely. I am not a fan of this Daniel Cameron. I am not a fan at all. Like, I've watched an interview with him. He's cocky. He's young. Smug. He's 34 years old. He's 34 years old, so he doesn't have a lot of experience to begin with. And here's one of the things. So on 4th of July weekend, we've got one of the police officers posting pictures on the beach with like two women in bikinis, like, you know, praising, oh, it feels great to be free. It's 4th of July. Just a few weeks ago, we see photos on the internet of Daniel Cameron, the man who was supposed to be running the investigation about this case. And he's hosting an engagement party at his house as he gets engaged. And it's just like, that's not a good look at all. No. Like, this is obviously the biggest case of his career. And this is probably going to be the biggest case of his lifetime. There are people around the entire world waiting for this to be resolved. You know, people in New Zealand are protesting, holding signs saying justice for Breonna Taylor. People all around the world know her name and are waiting to see justice be served here. This man is partying. He's living his life. Like, these men are living. This guy's at the beach, arms draped on women. This guy is having his Get Out style garden party. And meanwhile, everybody else in the world is like, what about Breonna?
What about Breonna? Yeah.
I feel like having this engagement party while this is going on, while what is most likely going to be the biggest case of your lifetime, I think that in of itself shows a complete lack of judgment. I know if it was me, I would say, babe, look, we can have our party. We're engaged, but we can have our party in a few months when I'm done with this. But we just can't do that right now. Now is not the time for that. But the fact that he can't even make that kind of decision, you know, show some good judgment in making a decision like that. How am I supposed to trust him to, like, be able to manage this investigation? And then, like you said, the fact that he has given no updates, he won't give any kind of timeline, and he just sits there so smug. And the thing that really, really turned me off of him, apparently Breonna's mom tried to reach out to him, wanted to talk to him. He avoided her, would not speak to her, and then had somebody else call her back.
Wow.
Now, I understand, maybe I don't know that world, and I understand if he's not allowed to talk to her about the case or whatever, I can understand that. But you can at least take her call, listen to her, and say, you know, ma'am, I want you to know I have so much compassion for what you've been through. I'm not, you know, at liberty to speak with you, but I just want you to know I'm going to do the best job I can here. And, you know, condolences to you and your family. I mean, that is just, to me, what a compassionate human being would do. But he would not even take Breonna's mother's calls.
I mean, for me, it's just the good old boy system at work. You know, it's like the police policing the police. And I mean, I hate to bring this up, but, you know, also the fact of what we're going through as a community, I feel as though there should be some compassion coming from people of our same ilk. And, you know, he's a black guy, you know, and he's a Republican. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with being a Republican. I don't agree with you, but there's nothing wrong with it. You can still show compassion for your community. You know that this should not have happened to this young.
I don't think he considers black people his community. That's just what it looks like. I mean, if you saw the pictures from that engagement party,
I just feel, you know, that shout out that you gave Breonna last week was so touching and heartfelt. And to see this guy in charge, it's like, are we ever going to see any justice? I mean, right now, I feel like with the George Floyd case, Chauvin is going to be sort of a martyr for them. Just like he's, you know, it's obvious, let's let this go. But this Brianna thing, you know, this Arbery thing, maybe we can let our guys go on this one. I just feel like the good old boy system is working on both cases. And I told you before, I'm extremely cynical, very, very cynical when it comes to these guys actually seeing justice.
Now, I will say that the felony charges have been dropped. The felony charges for the protesters, they have been dropped. And I think partly due to the fact that the attorney for the protesters pointed out that there was a protest back in May in Kentucky where right-wing protesters showed up just outside of the Capitol building, and they literally lynched the governor in effigy. They had a life-size doll with his face printed out and put on the face of this doll, and they took a rope and tied it to a tree and lynched the governor in effigy outside of the Capitol there. And guess how many felony charges there were? Guess how many misdemeanor charges there were?
0.
Guess how many people were arrested, Kenny?
0.
Exactly. So that was one of the points I think that their attorney brought up, like, hey, you've got people lynching in effigy the governor and nothing is done. These people are highly organized, peacefully protesting, sitting down in a yard, and you want to give them felonies?
Exactly.
Not happening.
Yeah. And it's another way to criminalize these people. You know, it's a part of the system. Now they've got something criminal on their record, whether it's a misdemeanor or not. It's something.
It's a felony. You know, there's like major implications for having a felony on your record.
Right.
And yeah, it's also meant to intimidate and discourage people from protesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar. I mean, I know we haven't talked about this, but it's like going on with the events out in Oregon. It's like, you know, at what point are the protesters going to be heard?
So anyway, just to kind of wrap up what we were talking about, Attorney General Cameron, I'm not impressed at all. At this point, I don't know that I trust him. I know Brianna's family has completely lost faith in him.
Right.
I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah.
So moving on, last week, 15 former employees of the team, formerly known as the Washington Redskins. By the way, just an acknowledgement. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about the fact that, that the owner of the Redskins, Dan Snyder, was considering changing the name after getting a bunch of blowback and major sponsors pull out. He has since then agreed 100% to change the name. We just don't know what it's going to be changed to yet. So I'll just call them the Washington NFL team so that I no longer have to say that slur.
Yeah.
So 15 former employees of the Washington NFL team and 2 journalists detailed some really disturbing sexual harassment and verbal abuse allegations that happened over the course of like a 13-year period within the front office of the team. This was an article that came out in the Washington Post. So since then, at least 2 employees have been fired. Another one retired abruptly. And the team has hired Beth Wilkinson, who is a big-time attorney, to conduct a review, and the goal is to implement new policies and procedures and kind of do some things, get an effective HR infrastructure there, and kind of get the culture where it needs to be. Some of the offenses that these women claimed is just in general that the environment was kind of toxic, but they were regularly asked to wear low cut or tighter clothing when they were going to be meeting with clients so that the clients would have something to look at. They were yelled at. Someone talked about being yelled at and called stupid. Just general, this is the type of workplace that you don't want to be a part of.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it goes into like, so first of all, this was for, I think it was reported that this had went on for 13 years. So it's going to be a monumental task for her to come in and erase 13 years of this type of misogyny and this type of culture that these people were subjected to. And the thing is it starts at the top. It's like he issued a statement that said something to the effect of, we need to get better and the time is now. And my response to that was, is it we or you, Dan? Like,
Good point.
Yeah, like, you need to get better. Two just quick anecdotes is one of the guys that I believe was named in this allegation from these 15 women, he was belittled for being a cheerleader when he was in college, and he was paraded and made to do cartwheels.
Wait, you don't mean that he was berated in college? He was berated at his job. Yes. At
his job while he was at a staff meeting for the team. And so when you're fostering that type of culture, you can only expect them to follow suit, you know,
exactly.
And feel like that it's okay to do, it's comfortable, you know. For me,
did they say that Dan did that, made him do cartwheels?
Dan made him do that. He also said that he wants to bring the craft of cheerleading as close to pole dancing every season moving forward. So
That's what Dan said?
That's what Dan said. He actually said that. And so if that's your mindset, where you want the cheerleaders to be viewed as strippers, and you want it to be sort of like subtle so that every year it looks a little bit more scantily clad or what have you. I mean, imagine how these other guys are taking that. I mean,
that sets the tone for the culture. The tone,
right. You know, it is what it is when it comes to that. Now, I've worked in environments where this is when I was a lot younger, but where I've seen this with my own two eyes. You know, I've seen people just sort of use women and sort of, you and I have been in the entertainment industry before, and you know, stuff like that is rampant in the entertainment industry. And it's like, when you're using women, you know how I am when it comes to any type of abuse, when it comes to women. And for me, when you're telling a woman that she has to be sexual to advance, it's like, do you have daughters? Do you have nieces? Do you have any other girls or young females in your life that you are trying to make great, in a sense? And if you are trying to make them great and make them think in terms of like how to grow and be equal to a man and be equal to, you know, a man in this world, at what point are you setting the proper examples for those young women coming up? And
very good point.
I don't know.
And ideally, someone shouldn't have to have, because we hear that a lot and we say that a lot, like, oh, don't you have daughters, sisters? Would you want your daughter, your sister? But you shouldn't have to have a daughter or a sister in order to just be able to see the humanity in another person.
Mm-hmm. A lot of these women had stated that they were in their offices just crying, you know, because if the head of the snake is like that, then where are you supposed to go? You're supposed to go to human resources? You know, how's that going to turn out for you? And I mean, some of the guys told these women that tried to buck back at them, well, there's 1,000 people that want your job. So it's just intimidation upon intimidation tactics. It's a damn shame that these girls had to go through this, and they're just now seeing the light of day that they can talk. Like one of the girl, Emily Applegate, she's one of the only people that's even given her name and doing live interviews. So yeah, it's a shame. I feel really bad knowing that I've seen an environment like this in action. I already know what these girls were going through. And
honestly, it's like something like this is, I mean, this is pervasive across industries. I think a lot of times it happens a lot easier in certain industries that have a less formal nature to them, like sports and like entertainment, just because the nature of the business is less stuffy in general.
Less corporate,
It's less corporate. We both just recently watched the documentary On the Record
Yes.
which is about the women who have the sexual assault allegations against Russell Simmons.
Mm-hmm.
It was so obvious in that documentary and just in general that in addition to the trauma that these women now have to deal with, I just think about what the rest of the world is missing out on, because decade after decade after decade, this has happened to women where they have not been valued for their genius and what they could bring to the table. It was so obvious in that documentary with Drew Dixon. She was a genius in the music industry. She is responsible from some of our favorite songs back in the 90s, some of the best collaborations. She was, bringing in new talent and wasn't able to fully, she hadn't even reached her peak yet before she essentially got pushed out or had to just leave because she couldn't do anything because men wanted to control her and dominate her. Right. Even though she was great at her job. And so we suffered. A journalist at the end of that documentary said it beautifully, like we all missed out on, imagine what she could have done in 20 years, these past 20 years, if she hadn't been, pushed out. And this has happened to women since the beginning of time. Women weren't even allowed in the workforce. And then once women were allowed in the workforce, they could only be secretaries. They could only be receptionists. Now that women are able to move higher, they still are facing, it's 2020 and still facing this type of oppression. And we, as the general population, we lose, we miss out when we oppress people. It's the same, I say the same thing about Black people. Like, imagine what this world would be like. Imagine the world that we would live in if Black people and women and Native American people, if everyone was just allowed to be great and bring their own personal genius to the world and serve the world. We wouldn't be worried about COVID. There would be no COVID. We would have cures for cancer. We'd have cures for AIDS. We would be living in a different world if everybody was just allowed to thrive. That's what hurts my heart in reading this. Not only for the women that have had to deal with this day in and day out, but we all suffer.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, once again, I all I know is the anecdotes that, these women gave in terms of, like, you'd already kind of covered it, but kind of going back to the documentary, because that sort of opens a door into the genius of this Drew Dixon versus, what they felt was valuable. It's like they felt stealing her dignity was more valuable than her genius, which I find pretty strange. I can't reconcile that. I can't really understand that. And kind of going back to my personal anecdote of living in that environment, I know several well-known actors, obviously I'm not going to mention any names, who were in a very similar situation in this environment I was in. And they were asked to do things in order to be seen on camera that they otherwise would not do. And it's like, once again, what are we missing out on when these types of things happen? If these women say no, which they should, and first of all, they shouldn't have to, but they should say no. And then what happens when you're dealing with younger women that are like, I got to pay the bills, and it's like, why are we doing this to our women in general? Like, why are we putting them in this precarious situation that, let's just treat them like the queens that they are? That's kind of how I look at it.
Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez. So here's the story. So apparently Megan Thee Stallion, Tory Lanez were hanging out at Kylie Jenner's house. They had posted a live video, the three of them together in the pool. So it gets kind of sketchy as far as what happened after that. What it appears is that they went to leave. There was a vehicle outside. They had a driver for the vehicle. They were in the car to leave. And then what it sounds like is that Megan exited the vehicle because she didn't want to be in the car any longer. Right. Apparently, someone from inside the car then fired a gun and shot Megan in the foot 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
She must have, at that point, gotten back in the car. I can only assume maybe the driver said, hey, let me take you to the hospital, because the car was pulled over just a short distance away from the house. And you've seen the video of the cops on their bullhorns, you know, stopping the car, yelling at the car, making Megan and other passenger, another woman, get out of the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, Megan was hobbling because initially the report was that there was glass in her foot. But we know for sure that at this point that she was shot, and the police then took her to the hospital where she had to have surgery to have the 2 bullets removed from her foot.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The other key thing that happened that night is that Tory Lanez was arrested on some charges for having a concealed weapon.
Right.
There were no charges, however, against him for shooting Megan. So my theory on this, to me, it's kind of obvious that he did.
But we must say alleged, yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think this is just a case of, you know, Megan respecting the G code and and like, okay, I'm not gonna snitch, but
I think it's totally that. I think it's the snitches get stitches mentality at work. We're watching it live, because from what I understand is the police had no idea she had been shot until she posted it on Instagram. And so this one is weird to me because the internet, I don't know. I'm like, I get that they're trying to joke about this incident because essentially his police and stuff came out where it showed his height and his weight. And so all over the internet, I'm just seeing nothing but jokes about his height. He's apparently 5'3", 120 pounds or something like that. So those are all the jokes. And we're missing the fact that Megan was shot in the foot.
Twice.
Like, can we not make light of that? Like, that's something serious. Now, to me, I totally agree with you. Like, we have to put the alleged tag on this because we don't know for certain. But everyone that is close to Megan that has actually came out and spoke has pointed their finger at Tory the only one person to really say his name was Juju on the Beat, who was like, count your fucking days, Tory Lanez. Like, he made it clear and then he deleted it. But for the most part, everyone is pointing at her. And one of your biggest things that you and I talk about all the time is your energy. You know, keep your energy around you positive and all of that, you know, stuff. And that is one of her, on her last post where she actually explained the incident. At the very top, her comment states that, you know, I learned my lesson. I'm paraphrasing. I learned my lesson, but now I know how to better control my, you know, the energy around me, or something to that effect.
Protect her energy.
Protect her energy. And I am hoping for the best for her. I'm a really big fan of her. When she first came out, she had that song with the baby and all that stuff. I was like, man, this girl is about to blow up. And I just knew it. I just saw it. And then she did, just like that. And, you know, she's under Jay-Z's label. She's got this song with Beyonce now that's a big hit. It's called Savage. So she's doing her thing. And I feel as though if he did this, which pretty obvious, I feel as though his career is over. I don't know. It has to be. Yeah,
Megan is so celebrated right now. She is it. Mm-hmm. She is it right now. And you shot her, bro?
Yeah. And now, okay.
Shot her?
So apparently there is a rumor out that they were sort of dating on the low key. And I think she wanted out of it. And I don't know if that escalated in the car, because that was her best friend in the car, her friend Kelsey. And then that escalated and turned into her foot getting shot. But if that is the case, then it's like, dude, you are threatening not only just one of our celebrities, but one of our Black queens. And I'm against violence against all women, but I'm like, if you are a brother, how can I say this? You have to treat our women with the utmost respect. You have to be a protector of our women. You can't be someone that destroys our women. You can't go around Skeeter Mills in it. You can't do that. You got to be a protector of our women. And I want to, tell all these young bucks out there, like, protect your women. Hold the door open. Go, if you are, help a lady out of the door. Learn some manners. Understand what when it comes to just people in general, just to be kind and courteous. And when you learn how to do that with other people, when it comes to your significant other, you will treat her with the respect that she needs to be treated with. So for me, this isn't funny to me. I feel as though, you guys can joke about his height all you want. You're going to be alone in that when it comes to me. I feel like we need to be focused on what's going on with Megan. And I don't know. I just have a strong heart when it comes to any sort of domestic violence. And you pulling out a gun on a defenseless woman in a bathing suit? Like, are you serious, man? I can't get with that. So any respect I have for him is out the window.
Yeah, you think he's done?
Oh, yeah, he has to. Yeah. If he did it, we have to say alleged. But if he did it, it's over. It's a wrap.
I mean, if someone in the car shot her, that means it was him, her best friend, or the chauffeur.
Right. And
I don't think her best friend shot her. And who got the gun charge that night?
Right. And Kelsey even alluded to that. Her best friend is Kelsey. She said, listen, I'm paraphrasing again. She said it was only one person. I didn't have a gun and Megan didn't have a gun. And it was one person with a gun. So she was basically saying,
you do the math.
You do the math, folks.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And yeah, back to what you were saying about energy. I think this is just one of those cases where this is a lesson for Megan, as she said. And unfortunately, she had to learn it in an incredibly violent and brutal way. Also, I mean, she's a performer. She's a dancer. This is her livelihood. In addition to her life, like, a bullet could have ricocheted, he could have missed, he could have hit an artery. Like, it's just insanity. But this is something that I preach in my everyday life to anybody who will listen, is that you have to be so unbelievably careful about who you let in your life. Who you allow into your circle, who you allow into your space, because the people around you can either be the cause for your elevation or the cause for your destruction. Right. And that is not a joke. I've heard this saying my entire life, and I hear a lot of famous people. I've heard Will Smith talk about it. You've got to look at the 5 people that you spend the most time with and that you interact with the most, because that is a direct reflection of who you are.
Exactly.
And so when you look at your 5, if they are not people that you hold in extremely high regard, people who you want to emulate in some way, look up to, aspire to in some way, if you don't see the people around you motivating you and inspiring you, then you might need to reevaluate who you're spending time with.
Right.
Because whatever they are, that is a reflection of who you are and where you're going. And it is so critical. And we are affected by the energy of those who are around us, the way that they talk, the way that they think, that their opinions, their values. Our energy it's sacred. And so you have got to be incredibly discerning about who you allow to have access to that. Right. And so I just think Megan it's just been a big life lesson for her, I'm sure. And hopefully other people can learn through this and not have to go through things themselves. Yeah. Hear these words that I'm saying, see what she's going through and what she has said that she's learned through this. And yeah, just protect your energy, people.
Yeah, you live and you learn, man. It's like, I hate to, it's like with this story, you kind of can see where people could joke and have fun with it. But this is something serious to her. So it's just hard for me to kind of go along with that. This is something serious
to
to her.
quote what she said, Black women are so unprotected and we hold so many things in to protect the feelings of others without considering our own. It might be funny to y'all on the internet and just another messy topic for you to talk about, but this is my real life and I'm real life hurt and traumatized.
And see, I didn't even know that she had made that statement. And so I feel exactly what she just said. I felt immediately as I was going through Twitter and Instagram and seeing all these jokes and posts and stuff. I'm like, okay, I get it, guys. He's short. Okay, now can we move on and talk about Megan and understand why this happened and what we're teaching our young Black men to how to treat our women. Like, let's focus on that right now, because I'm just not feeling that. Like, we've got to do better, as a people. And I hate to come off so serious today, but it's like, when it comes to the way we treat women, it's a direct reflection on how we're going to grow as a society. We can't have all this change and want all this stuff with the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're looking internally and we can't even take care of our own women. I mean, think about that, So yeah, for me, this is something, maybe we'll talk about it a little bit later on another episode, but this is something I feel very strongly about. So
that's all I got, Kenny.
All right. Well, today is today. It is what it is.
I don't know what that means, but it is today. Today is today. It is. So, yes.
Anyway, but yeah, Nico, we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. But do you have any last words? You kind of gave I kind of like what you just said though. Just a few moments ago, I really like that.
A little bit of a sermon. I didn't mean to, but that's what I have to say. And one other thing, Ruth Bader Ginsburg she's not doing so well health-wise. She's back in the hospital. She did put out a tweet that says, I am still in this. I can still do my job.
She is strong. Yes.
Woo! We know that she is just hanging on and fighting to be there for us. And so I just want to send her just all positive the healing energy and the best energy. And we love you, RBG. And we're just sending good vibes and healing energy your way.
Absolutely. Amen to that. All right, guys. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up.
Was today too heavy? It feels like it was like kind of a pretty heavy
It
day.
was pretty heavy, but I think we're going to have moments like that. These are just things that I feel like we had to talk about.
This is life.
This is life.
Okay.
Hopefully next week won't be so heavy.
We'll see.
All right, guys. We reset the week. We'll see you next week. All right.
Peace.